Fantastic.
Good.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Road to Copyright Clarity Part 2. We are happy to be coming to you today on St. Patrick's Day. So happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody. And I hope that everybody is doing well and staying well as we work through these uncertain times. And I believe that copyright clarity is very important in these times as we perhaps are streaming story times and things of that nature. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Renee Hobbs. Renee?
Thank you so much, and thank you for joining me today for Copyright Clarity. I see lots of old friends and new, and you are welcome to listen and participate through voice only. If you scroll, if this is your first time using Zoom and you scroll down to the bottom of the screen, you can see the start video, and that will activate your webcam so we can see you on screen. And you'll probably also notice the chat button. Why don't we start by introducing ourselves on the chat? I'm Renee, and I'm from Newport, Rhode Island, and today I am zooming in from my home, as I'm sure some of you are too. So put your introduction in the chat room to get us started. And I'll start my slides while you're starting to introduce yourselves via the chat. Welcome to everyone who's joined us for Copyright Clarity in part 2. In just 1 hour, we're going to kind of take a deep dive on making a fair use determination. And today we are very, very lucky to have Carla Myers with us from Miami University of Ohio. She was involved in a very important public statement that academic librarians put together regarding making fair use determinations during the coronavirus emergency. And we're going to get to talk with her about that project. But welcome, Michael. Welcome, Carla. I see Donna. Rob Stegman. Woohoo! Thanks for joining me today, buddy. Donna in Lewiston. Really glad you guys are all here. So if you haven't already found the copyright resources that we offer at the Media Education Lab, now would be a good time to explore those. And so I'm just going to, let's see if I can actually play from the current screen. Maybe that looks like a little bit better there. So you can go to mediaeducationlab.com, click on events, and scroll to the Copyright Clarity event. And a lot of the materials that I'm going to be sharing with you today are there. Of course, I've been thinking about copyright and how it relates to media literacy and digital learning since time immemorial, it seems. But my most recent book was published just this past year. It's called The Library Screen Scene: Film and Media Literacy in Schools, Colleges, and Communities. We look at 178 examples of film and media literacy practice in school libraries, in academic libraries, and in public libraries. And so that's really gotten me interested in bringing the messages about copyright and fair use to those contexts. Some of you might be old enough to remember where I got my start in this inquiry, and I talked to you guys about this, those of you who were here for part 1, 10 years ago when we had the opportunity to create the Code of Best Practices in Fair Use for Media Literacy Education. This was one of the first codes of best practice that try to clarify copyright and fair use for different communities, because different creative communities use copyright law in different ways. Documentary filmmakers use it in one way, and news broadcasters use it another, and librarians use it another, and poets and architects use copyright law in a different way. And yes, says Carla, for the codes, they are wonderful. There's lots and lots of them. And lots of what I'm sharing to you come from, obviously, the one that I was involved in, this Code of Best Practices for Fair Use in Media Literacy Education. So last time, in part 1, we explored these 3 questions. We asked, how do people use copyrighted works for learning? what myths and misinformation can interfere with understanding copyright law, and what's the purpose of copyright law. So, oh, and then how does copyright protect both the owner and the user? Because we're all owners of intellectual property. We all benefit from the strong protection that copyright offers us. And I personally am very grateful to have had copyright protection for copyright clarity, for Create to Learn, and for all my other books and creative work. So that strong protection that offers protection to intellectual property and to users of intellectual property was something we explored in part 1. And in part 1, we also understood that because the purpose of copyright law is to promote creativity, innovation, and the spread of knowledge, that really the law judges. This copyright law is called judge-made law. So when a case comes before the judge makes a determination, right? The judge weighs and balances the rights of the owner and the rights of the user, and thinking ultimately about the benefit to society. So that's at the heart of what copyright law is really about. Now, for those of you who missed part 1 but want a quick refresher, on the event page, I placed this 2-page handout, which is kind of a summary of what we did in our session in February. We went over section 107, section 110A, section 110B, and we got introduced to making a fair use determination. Today, we're going to drill down on that with some fun hands-on interactive activities. Because really, these are the 3 questions we're going to focus on today. What is the doctrine of fair use? What questions help people engage in the fair use reasoning process? And this question, the really important one for time of the coronavirus, how does context and situation apply to fair use reasoning? Okay, so let's just refresh ourselves about this important part of the Copyright Act of 1976, section 107 of the doctrine of fair use. You can see it was written in 1976 because at that time there must have been something called a phonorecord. And if there are any people on this call who remember those or could explain what those are, would you please put that in the chat? Right? Check that out. It says, notwithstanding the provisions of section 106 and 108, the fair use of a copyrighted work, including such use by reproduction and copies such as copies or phonorecords, by any other means, blah, 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 for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, including copies for classroom use, scholarship, and research is not an infringement of copyright. In determining, there's something I want to say about that. Sometimes when people come to this part of the law new, and they haven't been participating in the, oh, good show, Carla. Thank you so much. There they are. Material objects, she writes in the chat, check it out. Sounds other than those accompanying a motion picture or other audio version are fixed by a method. Got it. That's so cool. So it's basically a audio recording of some kind, right? That's cool.
Like any kind.
So oftentimes when beginners come to this particular part of the law, they think that the list that I've identified in yellow right here, criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, including multiple copies for classroom use, scholarship or research, they think that that's all that fair use covers. That's pretty wide if you think about it, right? Scholarship, teaching, research, criticism, comment, news reporting. But over the years, over the last 50 years of legal decisions, it's been very clear that when this was written by Congress, they didn't meant it to be an only list. It's that key word, such as, right? These were examples that the members of Congress who wrote this law imagined. And of course, other uses may also be fair use. So this is not a list that limits you. It's meant to be examples. But of course, there's those famous 4 factors: the purpose and the character of the use, the nature of the copyrighted work, the amount and substantiality of the portion used, and the effect of your unauthorized use on the market, right? And these 4 concepts, yes, good point. These are just examples. These are the famous 4 factors. And over the years, there have been a lot of methods used to try to help people understand the 4 factors. And you remember last time in part 1, I introduced you to the famous Bill Graham Archives versus Dorling Kindersley case, which had the publisher of the famous posters suing the book publisher for using these images without permission. In that case, the court found the publisher's use, the for-profit publisher's use of these images to be a fair use, noticing that the purpose of the original was a poster designed to generate publicity for a concert, and the new purpose, the repurpose, the transformative purpose of it when it was placed as a little small reproduction inside a book about the Grateful Dead, was to document and illustrate the concert events in historical in historical context. And so that kind of transformative use is what the court said is fundamentally the essence of creativity and what copyright is supposed to protect. So fair use helps creativity, it helps innovation, and it helps the spread of knowledge. But we found that the best way to introduce people to the 4 factors is to use the power of music. That's why we created this music video. Take a look.
It's right, section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. The doctrine of fair use tells us that we can't use a book stuff with no paying no permission. We can't use or put copyrighted material without permission or paying a license fee. When the cost to the copyright holder is less than the benefits of society. Yeah. Fair use has many strengths. First of all, it's flexible. Some people find it too big because it is contextual. Context and situation determine how fair use applies. Context and situation determine how fair use applies. We can use or put copyrighted material without permission or paying a license fee. When the cost to the copyright holder is less than the benefits of society. Yeah. How will I know when fair use applies to my situation? You must think through these 4 factors: the nature of the use, the purpose of the use, the amount of the use, and the effect on potential markets. But there's really one really important factor: transformativeness. Transformative add value, repurpose. Transformative add value, repurpose. Transformative add value, repurpose. Transformative add value, repurpose. We can use or put copyrighted material without permission or paying a license fee. When the cost to the copyright holder is less than the benefits of society. Yeah. So when you quote or use a copyrighted work, just ask yourself, did I repurpose? Did I add value? Did I repurpose? Ask myself, why did I use it? Is it different from why it was created? If it was, it's probably fair use. Did I add value to the original in terms of the cultural or the money market value? If I did, then it is fair use. We can use or put copyrighted material without permission or paying a license fee. When the cost to the copyright holder is less than the benefits of society. Yeah.
Woo! Okay, so if you have one of your lighters that you want to hold up and wave, obviously that's a rock and roll song designed to get you to think about transformativeness. And we found it's pretty useful. There's a lyric sheet that we've used to accompany this, but we encourage students to ask 3 questions, and teachers and creative people and librarians, when you're making use of copyrighted material, did your use of the work repurpose or transform the copyrighted material? Or did your use merely retransmit the original work? Could your work serve as a substitute or a replacement for the original? Because if it could, then that's not a fair use, right? That's an infringement. That's taking the rights of the copyright holder and away from them to control the distribution of their work. Did you use only the amount needed to accomplish your purpose? That might differ depending on what kind of work it is. If it's a quote from a book, if it's a chapter in a book, if it's an image, if it's a song clip, whatever it is. So making a fair use determination requires this critical question: did I transform the image or just copy it? So one of the people who really has inspired my work is Carrie Russell, and some of you know her as the author of Complete Copyright. She said, fair use cannot be reduced to a checklist. Fair use requires that people think. So what we're going to do now is we're going to break into small groups of 3 or 4 or 5 people. And I'm going to give you some hypothetical scenarios. And I'm going to ask that you and your team, well, first things first, you and your team need to introduce yourself to each other so you can even have a conversation, because you can't talk to a perfect stranger, right? So you introduce yourselves, and then I'm going to ask that you discuss the case by thinking about those 3 questions. So right now would be a really good time, my suggestion, right now while this screen is showing, make a screenshot. You know how to do that using your Mac or your PC. Make a screenshot so you can remember those 3 questions, because those are the 3 questions that I'm going to ask you to discuss in your small group. Now, let me just do something here. Hold on here. I want to go to the next slide. We're going to take the case of the book, a kind of famous children's book called Sylvester and the Magic Pebble. Is there anybody in the room who can describe to us this work? Is there anybody who's familiar with this work who can describe this work to us and help us visualize it in our mind? I don't have a copy of the book with me, but maybe there's somebody in the room who's familiar with the work of William Steig and the book Sylvester and the Magic Pebble. Anybody want to explain that book to us or say something about it? Yes? No?
I know the book.
Yeah, can you tell us about it, Deborah?
Yes, it's about he was a donkey or something, and he and his parents go out on a picnic, and he catches a magic pebble and is frightened by something while he's catching it, and makes a fearful statement like, "Oh, I wish I was a rock," and then he actually becomes a rock. Oh, he's not with his parents, because later his parents, no, he is, because his parents come and find him. Every year they come looking for him, and they sit near that rock, and they're wondering whatever happened to our little Sylvester. It's very sad. My colleague who used to read it to the class would cry. The picture book, and well, that's her. And then one day his parents are touching the magic pebble and say, "Oh, I wish our son was here," and then the rock becomes their son, and he's back.
Okay, I'm going to recap a little bit. Some people had trouble hearing you. This is an amazing story of a donkey who has a magic pebble, and it causes all kinds of complications to his life and to the people who love him. And of course, it all gets resolved very happily in the ending. It is absolutely a beautiful story. So it turns out that the use of this particular work can be used by other educators and librarians in many different ways. And so now I'm going to ask you to reflect on this particular case. Here's a hypothetical. Someone teaching an online graduate class demonstrates effective storytime read aloud practices by creating an educational video that features a teacher reading aloud from a picture book. Now, in order for you to apply fair use reasoning, you have to fill in the gaps. Even though there's some details here, we know who it was, someone teaching an online graduate class. We know what her purpose was. She was demonstrating effective storytime read aloud practices to her students. And we can kind of imagine how she used the book by kind of displaying it like a read aloud often does, you know, moving from page to page, et cetera, et cetera. So we can imagine what the video that she created, the educational video, but we don't have other details. So you and your partners are going to have to fill in the gaps. Some questions about how she distributed that video to her students, for example, or how she depicted the images. We don't know. You're going to have to imagine that for yourselves. But now what I'd like you to do is make yourself acquainted to your small group partners. I'm only going to give you about 4 minutes to ask those 3 important questions. Remember what they are? Did this instructor who's making this educational video about storytime reading aloud practices, was it transformative? Did it repurpose or transform the original material? Or did it merely retransmit the material? And did she use just the amount she needed to accomplish her purpose? And then I want you to come back and share with me what happened in your conversation. Okay, so there's going to be just 3 breakout rooms. Hopefully this will work. We'll give it just 3 or 4 minutes. Let's begin. Now you're going to be getting a message saying, join a breakout room. And so join the breakout room, introduce yourself to your partner, and have a discussion. Hey, Michael. Hey, Ava.
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Hello.
Nice.
Hey,
How are you guys?
Hey, nice to see you, Michael. So what do you think about this case?
So
Fair use?
I might fair use. I would say it depends. I think it depends on how much they're reading. It depends if it's like an open space, if it's on Blackboard, maybe behind the password or not. Those were like my first 2 thoughts. I'm not sure. What do you think, Ava or Renee?
Yes, I was thinking the same thing, that if she's just reading a couple of pages, that would be okay. If she read the whole book, it might get into some questionable territory. But then again, she's not, I don't know, she's not profiting off of it, but she isn't transforming it either. Unless you consider, you know, facial motions and actions transforming the story, making it come to life. I'm not sure, Renee. I'm confused. I would have thought I knew this, but now I'm kind of not sure.
Well, you know,
Scared.
part of why I picked these are complicated and interesting ones, but I just want to review the 2 points that Michael made, and then we're going to talk about the 2 points that you made. Michael, you said you thought it would matter if it was on like Moodle or Blackboard or something. Can you say more about why is that important?
I think it's because it's only like for a limited audience. So it's not, so it's showing that it's like, let's say on Blackboard at an university, it would show that it's like for an educational purpose and that it would not be for commercial purpose. So that was like the idea of the Blackboard.
Okay.
and also like to protect somehow like the copyrights, that it's not going to be
Right.
reused or made available most likely for other
Right.
people.
And you said something also about if she read aloud the whole book, or no, maybe Ava, you said that. Somebody said if she read aloud the whole book, that would be more problematic than if she only used a piece. Can you talk about what's your thinking behind that?
Yeah, so number 3 says, did you use only the amount needed to accomplish your purpose? And if her purpose was just to bring the story to life through some examples, she wouldn't have needed to use the whole book.
Yeah.
Wow, that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Now, Ava, you said something. So the third point, we got the first one is the delimited audience. The second point was the whole book versus just a portion to show the pedagogical practices of reading aloud. And then Ava, you said something about the performance. And
Yeah.
does it add value? Because of course, you know, if you've ever seen a good storytime librarian, man,
Right.
they are amazing.
Yes.
And they are definitely adding value, right?
Mhm.
With their
Right.
performance. How does that affect your making of a fair use determination?
That's where I'm confused, because it's not really transmitting the original story, you know, just on paper, reading it. It's actually, you know, physically bringing it to life. So to me, that counts for something, but I don't know if it counts for something in the copyright world.
Yeah.
Maybe in a way that you can say that it's like unique and original, and that maybe there's a distinction then to the book in a way, because like the way you perform it might be original, so you bring value to the whole thing. So maybe that's like I'm
Yeah.
not sure if that's the path to go, but that's like yeah.
Well, it does seem like recorded performances are copyrightable. And obviously, if her facial expressions and gestures and body movements or songs or who knows what she brings to this reading aloud experience, if that is her own creative expression, then it seems like she's definitely not just transmitting the book in the way that like an audio book would. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
Right. But audiobook is a derivative product, right? And so we'd have to really emphasize, how is this different than an audiobook?
So if it's not recorded, would that make it different? Like if she's reading it through a webinar or something like that, but it's not recorded. It's
Okay,
live.
if it's a live stream that's not recorded, that would definitely be more on the favor of fair use. Great point. Not recorded, right? Because it's not an object that is
right.
That's an interesting idea. Michael, I hear you thinking about that.
Yeah, I did not think about that actually, about the recording or not. So that's something new for me, or like something I had not thought about. Is he recorded or not, or like a live performance? So that's
Yep.
I want to hear about this.
In this case, she's creating an educational video, right? So
yeah, that's
definitely
true.
is not live streaming the way we might imagine, like during coronavirus, maybe that will happen, right? So she's making an educational video for her students. But we've gotten our 3 main things, so we're going to go back to the we're going to go leave the breakout rooms and go back to the main group and discuss a little bit more.
Okay.
Welcome. Now, if you haven't already found the up at the top right corner of Zoom, if you haven't used Zoom before, you can use the Zoom to focus on the person who's speaking. Like right now, I am the one who's speaking, and that's what you get to look at. Or you can use what I call the Brady Bunch effect, which is you can use that little set of squares, and now we see there's a few of us here, right? So let's talk it over. when it comes to that question of this case of someone in an online graduate class demonstrating effective storytime read aloud practices by creating an educational video that features a teacher reading aloud from a picture book, what issues came up in your conversation? Who wants to go first?
I guess I'll go first. Well, we talked about two things really. Was did the form that the teacher likely used, would that change whether or not it was a transformative use? And then we talked about, does audience make a difference? And Shannon, you mentioned how it was distributed, I think was what your concern was, right? Do I have that right? So those are the three things we talked about, really.
Cool. Can I ask you to talk a little bit about that first one, the form that it was in?
Sure.
What do you actually mean by that?
Well, we imagined that you know, she or he, the teacher, could have been holding the book up to the camera to demonstrate this, or could have gone to full screen graphics with text that she scanned from the book, or animated in some way. I mean, those are the three ways that it would work. And my opinion was, and I think we agreed on this, was that it probably didn't matter. That probably wasn't an impact.
And what's your reason for thinking that? It wouldn't matter whether she used a full page screen or whether we saw the book further at a distance. Why would it probably not matter?
Because the basic purpose in itself is transformative.
Explain. Why? Why do you say that?
Because the original work is intended for an audience of parents and children to understand a story, and the story could have a moral lesson, or it could be just entertainment, but probably was not to teach to an expected audience of education students how to read, how to do, to model reading aloud. So whether or not she was using it as a Schoolhouse Rock animation or holding the book up to the camera, the transformation is in the use, not the format of the presentation.
A very strong, thank you so much for that. Beautiful. That's a great demonstration of fair use reasoning. But other people in other groups had different ideas about applying the fair use reasoning process. What's another set of ideas that came up in your conversation?
Oh, us?
Now I'm talking to somebody else now.
Oh, different group, good.
Yeah, let me hear from another group. Please.
This is Carla. Does anybody from group 3 want to share what we discussed? Or I can. Let me know what you prefer, group 3 members.
Go, Carla.
So we talked about similar things. With the idea of what was the purpose, we talked about that what could be a transformative aspect is that here the presentation of the book is being used for teaching. That very often story time is designed as an entertainment to build children's love of learning, to expose them to literature and reading, and that here the presentation of the book is being used to teach librarians and educators an effective way to present story time. How do we do this in an engaging way? This is a retransmission of the work. However, we talked about the context of that being educational, and especially if it's being done within the context of a closed course management system, so it's being delivered to those people enrolled in the class, that could help support an analysis of fair use. And then also talking about a market substitute, something we talked about. Ooh. If instead, it's not likely that anybody would be logging into the course management system to sit their kids in front of the computer to watch this presentation as a substitute for buying the book. It's not the original intended market. Here, it's being used as something different. And then the amount needed to accomplish the purpose. We talked about how that could depend on the instructor's needs. Maybe they want to present the whole entire book. And we certainly know that fair use can support the reuse of whole entire works, but maybe they just want to share a small part of it as well because they feel like they can effectively teach this material with just part of it. Here, we would encourage the instructor to make a thoughtful application of how much of the work they wish to use or need to use to illustrate their point or effectively teach the material and use that amount.
Wow, lots of great ideas there. And I especially appreciate your point about if it's behind the walled garden of the learning management system, then of course it's not on the open internet. So it has less likelihood of being a market substitution for a book reading. Thanks for sharing that. Let me hear from that third group. What key ideas came up in your small group discussion about deciding whether or not this particular use was a fair use or not? Michael, Ava?
I think we had like some same ideas. I think we talked first about as well about like the closed environment actually. So we're talking about if it's on Blackboard or not. So that was one idea we brought up. And then we had also the argument about saying if it's like retransmitted or not. And so we're saying yes, it's kind of. So we're talking also about the performance right here, and we had like a longer discussion right here about the what that would mean if how it is actually performed, if it's like live or if it's a recorded performance. So, but maybe Ava and Rainey, you can help me out right here because that was a new idea to me. And yeah, I think then also like how it's distributed. I think that's what we talked as well, right?
Yeah,
So
we talked a little bit about whether physically animating the story transforms it at all to make it a transformation of the product.
Yeah, we had a conversation about whether her performance, her gestures, her body language, her expressiveness was itself a creative work. And if she was recording that, that was essentially definitely evidence of it being, you know, her own creativity, not just retransmitting. Okay, you guys are clearly up for case 2. All right, so this is a little same artifact. We're still talking Sylvester and the magic pebble, right? But now what I want you to do is go back into your small groups and you're going to be tackling this interesting case. Someone creates a video of a children's picture book by combining images from the picture book with audio narration of the text. Now, because fair use reasoning is situational and contextual, that case leaves a lot of openness. Who is the someone, right? What is their purpose? What does the form take? What does the distribution take? So you and your team need to figure out, if you can, conditions under which this would be more likely to be a fair use and conditions under which this would be more likely to be a violation. Give me a thumbs up if you understand the idea. We're talking over case 2. I'm only going to give you 4 minutes. So let's open up the breakout rooms now. I hope you get your same partner, but we'll see. I'm not sure about that.
It's 144 minus 100. We put a, see, I told them we have to think about it before you do this whole general thing.
Okay, there we go. We're in the breakout rooms now.
Max checked out for 100 because when she was trying to renew stuff,
Ooh, no. Ooh.
Oh,
That was quick.
Up,
That was-
up. I don't know what I did there. I'm sorry. You know, you just hit one button on this Zoom thing and it screws it all up. I'm
We were
gonna try.
talking really fast.
I'm gonna try that one more time, and this time, if I screw it up, then I'm doomed. But I think I should be able to do it right this time. My apologies for that. Open all rooms. Whew. All right, there we go. Better.
This someone was actually, yeah, for me it was maybe like the idea, is it an educator or like a salesperson, or like also like then linked to that the purpose.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because the circumstances seem very similar. She created a video without maybe her being, or this person, someone created a video without them actually being in the video, just showing images with a narration over it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel again like if they transformed it, it might, and it's for educational purposes, it might be a fair use.
It depends, I think. So one of the things that this example simply says, someone creates a video, so we know it's a video, of a children's picture book by combining images from the picture book with audio narration of the text. So we don't know what the purpose is. Can you think of a purpose that would make this a fair use?
So yeah, so that's what you had given us a hint that the someone might be important, so we were thinking about who that someone could be, and I'm thinking maybe, I don't know, maybe if it's for someone with a particular disability, that might be helpful. But I don't know that you would need to, if it's like a hearing disability, then you may not need to use the video and images. And if it's for a visual.
So what if it's for a kid with special needs?
Yeah.
Right? So the kid with special needs, they say, we want to have you read some words and choose the pictures. And maybe that is this kid's creative media product. So why would it be? So the other situation is that this would not be. This seems deeply problematic if this person is trying to compete with the audio book business, which, after all, like that's what William Steig has. An audio book is, you know, the picture, the animated pictures with a professional voiceover reading aloud.
Yeah.
So if somebody just goes and puts that up on the internet, then that seems
that's
like
problematic.
Not transformative.
Right.
If it's if somebody's trying to do it as like a professional product, right?
Yeah.
Right, and if they're taking payment or somehow getting some benefit.
Ooh, good. Write that down. Write that down. So if the someone, say that again. That's very good. We're going to someone.
If
someone is
getting payment or somehow receiving a benefit that is financially transferable, that transfers financially somehow.
Yeah.
That would make it problematic.
Yeah. That would be an infringement. But then now let's think of those other areas where it might be, depending on who the someone is and what their purpose is, it might be a fair use. We got this kid with the disability. I really love that. Love that.
Well, I mean, I think that's it. If it's somebody, if it's an accessibility question and they're doing it, okay, bye. Did we leave? No. Oh, okay.
Not yet. Not yet. Just put the thing on.
If it's for accessibility, it probably then isn't for a very large audience. It may just be for a specialized audience. And that might be.
Oh, yeah, good point. So the disability kid isn't distributing it to a wide audience. It's going out to the parents, maybe. So that's another
or to a special needs classroom. maybe just classroom.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so one of you take, Ava, you take that one. Michael, you take the professional who's scamming and trying to make a business, and we'll share out with the rest of the group.
Okay, here we go.
All right, here we go. Return to the main. Okay, you are coming back to the large group. Here we have been discussing the case number 2. Someone creates a video of a children's picture book by combining images from the picture book with audio narration of the text, right? So breakout room 1 is still working, and breakout room 3 is also still working. So we'll just give them a minute or two. They've got something to say, that's for sure. Okay, so thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for coming back to the large group. We've been discussing case number 2. Someone creates a video of a children's picture book by combining images from the picture book with audio narration of the text. Depending on a bunch of factors, you might evaluate this to be an infringement, or you might evaluate this to be a fair use. Let's hear from whoever wants to go first. Michael, Ava?
Okay. Well, we talked about a lot of things. This was a little bit of a toughie, or we made it that way anyway. We talked about whether it was an accessibility issue and whether it would be fair use if it was for a special needs population. That would make it okay.
Why? Why?
Well, because it might be somebody who, it might be a child in an educational setting that has a learning disability, and maybe they need to have the book read that way, or seen that way. And therefore it wasn't for profit, it was to help them be educated, to educate.
Interesting.
Okay, other perspectives? What happened? What did you discuss in your breakout room?
I think then Ava and you and I, we talked also about the situation if somebody would actually create like this kind of video for benefit, for financial benefits, and it seemed for us then obvious, or the interpretation would then go in the direction that it would be infringement of the copyright. So there was a kind of an easy interpretation.
Yeah, so if the guy was doing it as a professional and selling it, that would be infringing upon the right of the author to make his own derivative works, like an audio book, because this is like an audio book, right? Cool. What else came up in your small group? How'd you guys reason through this process? Fair use or infringement?
So our group in the breakout 1, we found this to be a significantly more problematic example for like a whole host of reasons. And the big thing, big exceptions that we made were if it was still in a like a demonstrating sort of context, like you were sort of showing students how to do this, like that would be more acceptable. If the distribution was much more narrow and like, you know, only within a class and it wasn't public, that might be more justifiable. And like just generally how much you were changing or taking, I guess, from the original work was like also a factor. But we thought it was a lot more difficult to make a case for this one.
Yeah, nice. And you identified exactly the elements to be thinking about, the purpose, the distribution, the amount used, and of course, those are all the reasons why a case-by-case analysis is useful. We've also found it really helpful to do this very form of breaking into small groups, because there is a kind of aha that comes from the way different groups of people sort of imagine what if, because that's exactly what's happening right now with the coronavirus, right? And that's why I want to make a transition to talk a little bit about, oh, let me just say one thing. In the materials that I'm leaving you on the webpage, we created a Google form that we use with students to help them practice this, right? So if I were modeling an educational practice, I would have had your group fill out the form, right? And then we would have compared our reasons using the form. And we think that having a chance to actually talk through these reasoning processes is helpful. And I've provided the materials for you to make a copy of this form for yourself and repurpose it and use it as you want. And we're not going to have time to get to case 3, but case 3 is equally interesting. Imagine that someone uses a variety of different copyrighted images to create a book trailer for a children's picture book about Sylvester and the magic pebble, right? There's another scenario for reasoning. But clearly we want to flag for educators if you're copying to avoid making a purchase, if you're copying merely to exploit the popularity of another person's work, if your copy becomes a substitute or replacement for the original, then like little red flags should go off in your mind, right? And you always have a choice whether to claim fair use or use royalty-free content or pay a license fee or not use the work. Those are always options available to you. But what I think is really exciting, oh, and of course we have to mention the good faith defense, right? For educators and librarians, and you make a fair use determination and it turns out you were wrong, statutory damages are remit to 0, which means no financial penalties can be awarded. This is why cases don't come up involving educators and librarians, because there's literally no money to be made. Right? The lawyers can't make money off it. So this was a really brilliant piece of legal work by the Congress, section 504C32. And it allows us to have confidence that we can make a fair use determination. And even if we're wrong, we have a little bit of credit, so to speak. But context and situation matters a lot right now. So I want to turn it over to Carla. Carla, can you talk to us about this amazing document that you and your partners, your friends, colleagues created called the Public Statement of Library Copyright Specialists Fair Use and Emergency Remote Teaching and Research? Can you share a little bit about how it came to be that you produced this document on March 13th?
Sure, I'm happy to. And thank you so much for the invitation to be here and talk about this. And I just want to put into some context first that I'm going to be speaking exclusively from my perspective, what motivated me to be part of this, and kind of how I saw some of the discussions going on. So I'm not speaking for everybody in the group, just from my own perspective. So my name is Carla Myers. I'm a copyright librarian at Miami University, which is in Ohio, not Florida. And of course, my job is to help answer copyright questions for my campus community, all kinds of questions from students, from my coworkers, especially from faculty regarding the reuse of materials as part of education, whether it is face-to-face or online education. Last Tuesday, Miami University got the announcement. Actually, let me take that back. Last Monday evening, the library got the announcement, the campus got the announcement that we were moving to remote instruction as of Tuesday. I think lots of campus communities or lots of educational institutions got that announcement around the same time. And all of a sudden, it was like the panic button for copyright librarians. I was getting contacted not just by faculty at my institution, but by librarians and educators across the United States saying, whoa, what does this mean for copyright? What about fair use? What about 10%? So first off, we all know that 10% is a bunch of hooey. It is a made up number. We saw the statute. It's not in there anywhere. So that's one of the first things that I said. And I think as a consensus, as I was talking about this with some of my fellow copyright librarians, we all agree that copyright can't be set aside at this time. You know, the law is still there, just like what's going on doesn't mean we can drive 85 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone. Copyright's still there, it still exists, but as Renee said earlier, and thank you so much for saying this, user rights exist for all kinds of situations. And in an unprecedented situation like this, it's fair use's time to shine. We don't want to set aside copyright. We still have to be thinking about it. But what personally motivated me to be involved with this statement is I don't think applications of fair use and other user rights should be the overriding concern of our instructors at this moment. Their concern should be, how do we most effectively teach and get information and access to our students? So there's options. This is the thing I love about copyright. There's always options, and Renee just brought some of these up. So the number one option we're encouraging our campus communities is look at all this amazing content that we have online. We have ebooks, we have e-journals, we have streaming video collections, we have streaming music collections. These collections were licensed by the library for our patrons to use. They're perfect in online education because you just share that link with your students and there they go. And those situations where content is not available electronically, we're looking at services like electronic reserves. How can we take textual works in our collection and utilizing fair use, make those available in this online education setting. For video, the same thing. I will share an example that I just had yesterday. We had a faculty member who's teaching a film history class. What we're doing right now is licensing many things we can through Canopy or Swank, things like that. But they said, Carla, this film's from 1964. I don't think Swank or Canopy is going to have that. I promise you they didn't. I searched. Nobody had this available in the streaming format. It wasn't even on Amazon to direct students to. So we thought about, what is the instructor's purpose? They are teaching a film history class. They said this is a critical film to watch. Here's how we're using it as part of the assignment. What's the nature of a work? It's a popular film title, I guess you could say. What's the amount that they need? I told the instructor, talk with me. How are you using this in your class? Do you need just a portion of the film? Do you need the whole entire film? They said, I need the whole entire film. Here's why we need it, because they're going to watch it. They're going to answer these questions about it. We're going to talk about comparing it with other films the director has done. We're going to talk about it, how it fits in the context of the other film histories that we're looking at in this class. What's the effect on the market? I promise you, if there was a license for this in Swank or Canopy, we go license it. So this is available to everybody. It wasn't. Nowhere on the web that I could identify whatsoever was this available in a streaming format. So in this particular situation, we don't see a potential license market. Now, as part of this process, sometimes we might work into fair use analysis. You know, can we go ask permission for something? But I can tell you here, our thought is we want to get this film into the hands of our students and instructor as quickly as possible. So making a fair use determination, we streamed and made this film available for the students in the class. It's locked down to a closed content management system. You know, permission could come into it at some point, but I think with this statement, we wanted to encourage people, fair use should not be a barrier here. Fair use is here to support it. And things that we might otherwise have done, we may not want to, I shouldn't say may not want to consider, may not be at the same level of priority when it comes to making fair use determinations as it is for this very unique and unprecedented situation we're in right now. So it was my hope that in contributing to the statement, it would help remind people fair use is out there. It is for us to apply. The courts have talked about its flexibility and adaptability to a particular situation. And again, we don't want to rule out all the options that are out there, but let's be confident in our fair use determinations. Let's make thoughtful fair use applications. But this unique situation with remote access and everything else going on, it modifies and works into this fair use determinations, more fair use determinations that we're making. I hope that's helpful. I know we're getting up on 3 o'clock. Renee, if you're able to keep the room open, I'm able to stay on for a while to answer questions folks might have about this.
Oh, Carla, thank you so much. I absolutely love the idea. You know, I've got that, I don't know if most of you guys know this really great trick on Google. If you go to the link, I put it into the chat, and you go to the end, see where it says preview. If you rewind preview and you type in copy, it'll let you make a copy of the statement for your own self. So you can do what I did. You can annotate the copy as you read it, right? And realize that actually in a very short space, you have, with this document, explained key ideas about copyright that will be very effective for students and teachers. So I am really grateful to you for providing this resource for us. Now, I also want to talk a little bit. I'm making a quick transition here because we are going to end now. We're going to stay on, but maybe you guys have something else to do. But I just wanted to remind you that the materials and resources we shared are going to be here. I'll put the video here for you to watch later. And we have one final session coming called The Road to Copyright Clarity Part 3. Here we're probably going to take on the DMCA, the takedowns, and ripping video and all that stuff. So I invite you to join us for Part 3, Tuesday, April 21st, coming soon. And we'll just now officially call the program closed, but we'll stay for questions and answers. Melissa, thank you so much for coordinating with the Northeast Ohio Regional Library System. We'll give a big round of applause to the Ohio School Public and Academic Librarians, as well as those of you who are joining from further away. So, like you, Michael, coming to us from Paris.
Oh, incredible.
Oh, wow.
Thank you, Renee, for this very informative, interactive program that we've had today, and very timely. Thank you, Carla, for sharing your knowledge and putting it in place in practice with what is currently going on in these uncertain times. So thank you, everyone.
Wonderful. All right.
We'll look for the archive.
Yeah, we'll wait for the archive. And of course, we probably, on our 21st call, we'll probably talk a lot more about how librarians are dealing with coronavirus vis-a-vis copyright and fair use. So I do feel like we're in a big learning curve right now, but the guidance from this document gives us a little bit more courage, a little bit more confidence. And like you said, it's the flexibility of the law that's built in that we're recognizing is part of its continuing relevance to our lives today. So what questions do you have that got unanswered in this session that you'd like to answer?
And in the pause, just one thing to throw out there, because I want to emphasize this. This statement was a giant group effort, which, you know, I contributed to, but we had some fantastic leaders, Laura Quilter out of UMass, Anna Enriquez from Penn State, Brandy Caro, which I think is also from Penn State. So this was a tremendous group effort that I was beyond honored to be part of. Yeah, we hope this statement is helpful to people. And to also clarify too, via that statement, we're not saying everything anybody wants to do is fair use. Like, that is one thing we all felt very strongly. What we wanted to do is help people feel more confident in making fair use applications during this time of many questions and uncertainty regarding life in general, and especially access as part of education.
You know, it's such an incredibly, what I appreciate about the effort, first of all, the fact that it was collaborative is amazing. And I also feel like we're all feeling a lot of anxiety now about absolutely everything. And so it's like, if you can just bracket off this for the moment and then breathe, it's like, it enables us to be super productive. Otherwise, we could all descend into a nightmare of, just too much anxiety to even be productive. And that does no good to anybody.
And I think it's so interesting that you say that, Renee, because somebody literally said this to me yesterday. They said, in the scope of everything else I have to deal with, why should I even care about copyright? And I said, we should always care about copyright. These are other people's intellectual property works. And just in the same way we hope people respect the works that we create, we should care about it. But I said, what we're telling you right now is this should not be your overarching concern. I don't want you sitting at your desk at home biting your nails about, am I going to get sued for sharing something online with my students? We want you to know that fair use is out there. It's available to us. And as you said, it's flexible and adaptable to these times. And one of the things we have to think about is, in regards to making film available, because I know that's a big consideration. It was always, well, can students come to the library and get a copy? Can they go to the public library and get a copy? Now even the public libraries are closed. Almost all libraries are closed. So, how does this work into these applications and thoughts of fair use? What are all these situations? So it was our hope that it was my hope in being part of this, that this could help take out some of the anxiety from these particular situations, knowing that it's flexible and adaptable.
Yeah, it definitely does. I see a great question from Bobby. When university students create a multimedia project, can they use songs, video clips, etc., as part of their project if they are uploading to the internet? And of course, the answer is, it depends, right? So we ask those 3 questions. Is their use repurposing it? One of the things we talk about with our students is, if you're taking a little excerpt of a John Lennon song, right, to talk about the history of protest songs, and you're weaving in that little bit of John Lennon song with a lot of little bit of other protest songs from other time periods and eras, that's more likely to be a fair use, because it's essentially like a quote. It's a quote, right? So when students use excerpts that are more substantial is when they really have to ask that second question about, am I retransmitting somebody else's work? This especially happens when undergraduates want to use that whole Lizzo song underneath their lovely work, right? Essentially making a Lizzo music video. Well, in that case, their use of the whole song might be a market substitute for watching the Lizzo video with its advertising on YouTube. So we like the idea of those 3 questions, and even that careful documentation of the form where they have to explain their reasoning allows them to think about the rights of the owner and the rights of the user. What other questions do you have? The other issue of market is you're depriving, exactly, that's exactly right. You're depriving Lizzo of a license for her music. So we really want students to be aware of when their work is a substitution and when it's adding value and repurposing. And you know what? My experience is when students appreciate that, then they work extra hard to make creative use of the intellectual property that they're using. They still use it, they just use it in more really creative ways. So, all right, so I think if we don't have any other questions, I'm gonna wave goodbye to you. I hope to see you in April for our 3rd Copyright Clarity. Carla, thank you so much for joining us. And Shannon, Ava, Donna, Michael, Bobby, and all the rest, thank you for joining us too. We'll see you next month, bye-bye. And listen,
Thanks,
keep safe,
everybody.
wash your hands, stay indoors, keep safe, and we'll see you in April, bye-bye.